Poor man buys abandoned cabin. What his son finds there changes their lives. Michael Johnson was holding the last of his $50 bills when he saw the ad in the local Pineville newspaper. A widower for 3 years, he worked as a construction worker during the day and a janitor at night to support his 8-year-old son, Ethan, but the landlord of their rented apartment had given them 15 days to leave. "Dad, why do we have to live in such an ugly house?" asked Ethan, as he looked at the deteriorating wooden structure that could barely stand. Michael held tight to the yellowed paper with the property listing. He had bought that cabin without even visiting it, using his last savings of $2,000 that he kept in a coffee can in the kitchen cabinet. "Son, it's just temporary until Dad can find a better place," he lied, knowing there wasn't enough money for the first month's rent anywhere else. The cabin was at the end of Cherry Blossom Street, in a rural area far from the city center. The roof planks were loose, some windows had no glass, and the yard was overgrown with tall weeds. Michael looked around and felt his heart sink. How had he reached this point in his life? 3 years ago, when Jennifer was alive, they lived in a simple but comfortable house in downtown Pineville. She worked as a cook at the public school, and he had a small construction business. Ethan went to a private school, and on weekends they would stroll in the city park. Everything changed when Jennifer was hospitalized for 2 weeks with pneumonia and didn't survive the complications. The hospital bills consumed all their savings. The construction business went bankrupt when Michael couldn't focus on work in the following months. Jennifer's life insurance barely covered the funeral costs. In less than a year, father and son were in a one-room apartment in a boarding house in the cheapest part of town. "Dad, look what I found," shouted Ethan from the back of the property. Michael dropped the suitcase with his clothes on the crooked porch and walked through the tall weeds. The boy was crouched near a blackberry tree, digging in the dirt with his hands. "It's a box, Dad, it's buried here." The man approached and saw that there was indeed a metal box partially buried among the tree roots. It wasn't very big, about the size of a shoebox, but it was heavy when they pulled it from the ground. "Do you think there's treasure?" asked Ethan, his eyes shining. Michael shook his head and smiled for the first time in weeks. His son's innocence could still spark some hope in his weary heart. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Inside the cabin, Michael managed to force the rusty lock on the box with an old screwdriver he found in a kitchen drawer. Ethan squeezed next to his father, curious to see the contents. There were yellowed papers, some faded photos, and a small notebook with a leather cover. Michael picked up the first photo and felt a shiver run down his spine. It was an elderly woman with grey hair hugging a small child in front of that same cabin, only it was well kept, with flowers in the garden and fresh paint on the walls. "Dad, isn't that you when you were little?" Ethan pointed to the photo. Michael looked closer. There really was a striking resemblance between him and the child in the photo, but he was absolutely certain he had never been to that property before. "No, son, it must just be a coincidence," he replied, but his voice came out shaky. He picked up one of the papers and recognized it as a property deed, dated 1985. The owner's name was smudged by moisture, but he could make out the letters Johnson in the last name. "Look, Dad, there are more photos here." Ethan had spread the contents of the box on the wooden floor of the living room. There were at least 10 photographs, all showing the same elderly woman at different moments of her life, always in that cabin or its surroundings. In some, she was alone tending the garden. In others, she appeared with the child who looked like Michael. In the notebook, the pages were stained but still legible. It was a sort of diary, written in a feminine and delicate handwriting. Michael read the first page in a low voice. "March 15th, 1987. Today I planted the rose saplings I bought at the market. Michael loved the red roses when he came to visit me. I hope one day he returns to see how beautiful they've become." Michael's heart raced. It couldn't be a coincidence. He looked at Ethan, who was playing with a tiny wooden doll he had found in the box. "Son, let's put these things away and we'll look at them carefully later, okay?" But Ethan had already found something that caught his attention. It was a sealed envelope with the name Michael Johnson, written on the front in the same delicate handwriting as the diary. "Dad, look, it has your name here." Michael took the envelope with trembling hands. How was this possible? He carefully tore the seal and pulled out a 2-page letter. My dear grandson Michael, if you are reading this letter, it means you have finally found your way back home. I am Grandma Elizabeth, your paternal grandmother. I know you must be confused because your mother told you that I had abandoned the family when you were little. That was never true, my son. I was always here, in this cabin that I bought with my savings after they kicked me out of the house. Michael felt his legs go weak and sat down on the floor next to his son. His hands were shaking so much he could barely continue reading. Your mother, Patricia, never forgave me for opposing her marriage to your father. She thought I interfered too much in the couple's life. When you were born, she forbade me from visiting you. She said that if I tried to see you, she would move far away with you and your father. I didn't want to be the cause of a family separation, so I stepped back. But I never stopped loving you and thinking of you every day. Ethan noticed his father was crying and came closer, resting his little head on his shoulder. Why are you sad, Dad? Michael wiped his eyes and tried to smile at his son. How to explain to an 8-year-old child that he had just discovered he had had a grandmother who loved him and whom he never met? It's not sadness, son. They're tears of joy. He continued reading the letter. Grandma Elizabeth explained that she had bought that cabin in 1985, 2 years before Michael was born, dreaming that one day it would be the house where she would welcome her grandson. She worked as a seamstress and embroiderer, making trousseaux for brides in the region, and saved every penny to improve the property. The letter also revealed that Grandma Elizabeth had tried to make contact several times over the years. She sent letters to the family's address, but they all came back or simply weren't answered. She found out years later that Michael's mother had moved without leaving a forwarding address. Dad, who wrote this letter? It was the grandma you never met, son. I had a grandma. Michael took a deep breath. His mother, Patricia, had told a completely different version about his paternal grandmother. According to her, Grandma Elizabeth was a difficult and selfish woman who had abandoned the family when Michael was 2 years old. That's why he grew up believing he had no living grandparents. Yes, you had a great-grandmother who was very special and lived here in this cabin. Is she still alive? Michael looked back at the date on the letter. It was written in 2015, 8 years ago. At the bottom of the page there was a different note, in a shakier handwriting. P.S. I am keeping this letter in a box buried in the garden, as I feel my time is coming to an end. If you ever come looking for your roots, I hope you find this message and know that I always loved you more than words can express. The key to the cabin is under the clay pot in the right corner of the porch. This house was always yours, my dear grandson. Your grandmother who never stopped waiting for you, Elizabeth Johnson. Michael looked around the cabin with new eyes. Those wooden walls had sheltered a woman who loved him and who spent decades waiting for a reunion that never happened. Ethan, let's take a better look at the house. I think we're going to stay here for quite a long time. They spent the rest of the afternoon exploring the rooms. The cabin had 2 small bedrooms, a living room, a simple kitchen, and a bathroom. Despite its deteriorated state, the structure was solid. Michael noticed that some repairs had been made recently. There were new floorboards mixed with the old ones in the kitchen floor. In the larger bedroom, they found an iron bed still in good condition and an old wardrobe with some women's clothes inside. Ethan ran to the smaller room and shouted excitedly, "Dad, there are a bunch of toys here." Michael approached and saw a collection of old toys carefully stored on a wooden shelf. Toy cars, rag dolls, a wooden rocking horse, and several children's books. Grandma kept these toys for when you would come visit her, Michael explained, feeling a lump in his throat. But can I play with them now? Of course you can, son. She would have been very happy to know you are here. When the sun began to set, Michael went out to check the condition of the land. The backyard was much larger than he had imagined, with several fruit trees and an artesian well that still worked. At the back of the property there was a small shed that could be used as a workshop. It was then that he noticed an elderly lady approaching the wire fence that separated the properties. She was carrying a pot in her hands and walked slowly, but with determination. "Good afternoon. Are you the new resident?" Michael approached the fence. The woman must have been about 70 years old, with white hair tied in a bun and a kind smile on her face. "Good afternoon. I'm Michael Johnson. I just bought the property. I'm Mrs. Margaret. I've lived in the house next door for 40 years. I brought some chicken soup for you. I imagine you haven't had time to make food today." The neighbor's kindness moved Michael. It had been a long time since he had received such a caring gesture from a stranger. "You are very kind, Mrs. Margaret. Thank you so much." This house stood empty for a long time. It's so good that a family has finally arrived to bring life to it again. Michael accepted the pot and hesitated before asking the question that was bothering him. "Mrs. Margaret, did you know the previous owner, Mrs. Elizabeth Johnson?" The neighbor's face lit up. "Of course I knew her. Elizabeth was my best friend, a wonderful woman, hard-working like few others. She always said that one day her grandson would show up to live in the cabin." "The grandson?" "Yes, she talked a lot about a grandson named Michael, whom she never got to see grow up. She said her daughter-in-law didn't allow contact, but that one day the truth would come out." Michael felt the world spin around him. "Mrs. Margaret, I am Michael Johnson, Mrs. Elizabeth's grandson." The elderly woman dropped the spoon she was holding and brought her hands to her chest. "My God in heaven, you are Michael, Elizabeth's little grandson." "It seems so. I just found a letter from her explaining everything." Mrs. Margaret began to cry and held Michael's hands through the fence. "I waited for you until her last day, my boy. She would spend hours sitting on the porch looking at the road, waiting for you to appear." "When did she—" "3 years ago. She passed away in her sleep, peacefully. But she always said that before she left, you would find your way home." Michael felt tears streaming down his face. His grandmother had passed away 3 years ago, exactly when Jennifer had also left. It was as if the two most important women in his life had met on the other side. "Mrs. Margaret, may I ask you something? Who has been taking care of the property since then? Some things here are well maintained." The neighbor smiled mysteriously. "Oh, my dear, your grandmother left everything organized. She had a small savings and asked me to manage it. Every month I pay the electricity and water bills and hire a young man to do the basic maintenance. Elizabeth said that when you showed up, everything should be working." Michael couldn't contain his emotion. Even in her passing, his grandmother had cared for him with so much love and dedication. "Ethan!" he called for his son. "Come meet Mrs. Margaret, our neighbor." The boy came running up with a wooden toy car in his hands. "Hi, I'm Ethan." "What a beautiful boy." Mrs. Margaret bent down to the child's level. "You have the same light eyes as your great-grandmother Elizabeth." "Great-grandmother?" "That's right. The lady who lived here before was your daddy's great-grandmother, so she was your great-grandmother too." Ethan looked at his father for confirmation. "It's true, son. And she left all those toys for you." That night, father and son ate Mrs. Margaret's chicken soup sitting on the living room floor, illuminated by 2 candles they found in a kitchen drawer. Michael had managed to get the electricity turned on, but he preferred the intimate atmosphere of the candles. "Dad, are you sad because you didn't get to meet great-grandma?" Michael thought about his son's question. There were many mixed emotions in his heart. A little sad, but also very happy. Happy why? Because now I know there was always someone who loved us, even without us knowing, and that person left us a house to live in. Ethan chewed a piece of bread and looked around the room. "The house is kind of broken, huh, Dad?" Michael laughed. A child's honesty always put things in perspective. "Yes, it is, son, but we're going to fix everything together, slowly. What do you think?" "Cool. Can I help?" "Of course you can. You'll be my official assistant." They slept that first night on the old mattress they found in the wardrobe, covered with a crocheted blanket that still smelled of lavender. Michael lay awake for hours, staring at the wooden ceiling, trying to process everything he had discovered. His mother had lied to him his entire life. There was a grandmother who had loved him unconditionally and whom he had never met. Now he had a house of his own, even if it needed a lot of repairs. And, more importantly, he had the feeling that he had finally found the place where he and Ethan belonged. The next morning, Michael was awakened by the sound of voices outside. 2 women were talking loudly near the front fence. "I'm sure they're squatters," one of them said. "This property can't just be occupied by anyone." Mrs. Margaret said they bought it legally, replied the other. Margaret is getting senile. How can someone buy a property without even knowing it belonged to their own family? Michael got up and went to the front window. He saw two middle-aged women looking at the cabin. One of them was well-dressed, in expensive clothes with salon-styled hair. The other looked simpler. He went out onto the porch and greeted them politely. "Good morning, ladies. Can I help you with something?" The well-dressed woman approached the fence with an air of authority. "Are you the one occupying this property?" "I'm Michael Johnson, the new owner." "Owner?" She laughed disdainfully. "Young man, I believe there's a mistake. This property has belonged to the Johnson family for decades. I'm Victoria Johnson, cousin of the late Elizabeth." Michael felt a pang of worry. He hadn't considered the possibility of other family members claiming rights to the cabin. "Ma'am, I have the purchase deed. I acquired the property legally through a newspaper ad." "Deed?" Victoria laughed out loud. "Young man, that woman had no right to sell anything. This property should have passed to the legitimate heirs of the Johnson family." The other woman, who had remained silent, stepped closer. "Victoria, are you sure about that? Elizabeth always said she had left everything arranged for her grandson." "Shut up, Nancy. Elizabeth was senile in her last years. Any paper she signed has no legal value." Michael felt his anger rising, but he tried to stay calm. Ethan had appeared on the porch and was watching everything with curiosity. "Mrs. Victoria, I have all the documents in order. If you have any legal challenge, I suggest you contact a lawyer." "Oh, you can be sure I will." She pointed her finger at Michael. "And when I prove that you have no right to this property, I'll want compensation for emotional damages." The two women walked away, but Michael could still hear Victoria talking loudly. "Nancy, you just wait and see. I'll have these trespassers out in less than a week. This property is worth a fortune, and it's not going to stay in just anyone's hands." Michael sat on the porch next to Ethan, who was playing with the wooden toy car. "Dad, why was that lady yelling?" "She thinks our house belongs to her too." "But didn't Great-Grandma leave the house to us?" "She did, son, but sometimes people get jealous and want to take what isn't theirs." Michael spent the rest of the morning rereading all the papers he had found in the box. The deed was in the name of Elizabeth Johnson, and there was a simple will leaving all assets to "My grandson Michael Johnson, son of Robert Johnson." Robert Johnson had indeed been his father's name, who had passed away when Michael was 15 in a work accident. Everything seemed to be in order, but he didn't understand anything about legal matters. Around noon, Mrs. Margaret appeared carrying a basket with homemade bread. "Michael, my dear, I heard that Victoria came here causing trouble. Do you know her?" "I know her very well, unfortunately. She is a distant cousin of Elizabeth's, but they never had any contact. Victoria only showed up here twice in 40 years, always wanting something." "Does she have any legal right to the property?" Mrs. Margaret shook her head vigorously. "No right at all. Elizabeth was always very clear about that. This house is yours, Michael. Your grandmother kept all the necessary documents in a folder inside her bedroom wardrobe." Michael went back inside and searched the wardrobe. At the bottom of the lower drawer, he found a leather folder with several documents. Besides the original deed and the will, there were tax payment receipts, renovation receipts, and a birth certificate for Michael that he didn't even know existed. There was also a letter from the notary's office confirming the will's registration and a handwritten note from Elizabeth herself. In case family members show up wanting to contest this will, they should be referred to Dr. William Parker Hamilton, the lawyer responsible for all my legal affairs. Phone 555-466-7891. Michael felt immense relief. His grandmother had been foresighted and had left everything very well organized. He called Dr. Parker at the phone number he found in the documents. This secretary informed him that the lawyer was with a client, but could see him later in the afternoon. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. At 4 in the afternoon, Michael took the bus to downtown Pineville, carrying Ethan and all the documents in a briefcase. Dr. Parker's office was in a simple room on the second floor of an old commercial building. "So you're the famous Michael," said the lawyer, a man with greying hair and a kind smile. "Grandma Elizabeth spoke so much about you that I feel as if we've known each other for years." "Doctor, I need to clarify something. I didn't know about my grandmother's existence until yesterday. My mother told me she had abandoned the family when I was little." Dr. Parker shook his head sadly. "Elizabeth told me the whole story, Michael. Your mother never forgave the fact that your grandmother had opposed the marriage. Patricia believed that Elizabeth considered her an inferior person because of the social difference." Social difference? Your grandmother was the daughter of a well-off family. Your grandfather, Robert Johnson Sr., had been the owner of a small textile factory. When he passed, he left a considerable inheritance for Elizabeth. Your mother, Patricia, came from a humble family and always had an inferiority complex. Michael listened attentively, discovering details of a family history he was completely unaware of. When your father, Robert Jr., fell in love with Patricia, Elizabeth didn't oppose it out of prejudice, but because she noticed the young woman was very jealous and possessive, she feared this would bring problems to the marriage. And did it? Patricia interpreted any affectionate gesture from Elizabeth as an attempt to control the couple. When you were born, she said she didn't want a mother-in-law interfering in her son's upbringing. Elizabeth tried to explain that she only wanted to help and spend time with her grandson, but Patricia was unyielding. Dr. Parker showed a folder with several letters that Elizabeth had kept over the years. Your grandmother wrote to you dozens of times. She sent letters on your birthday, at Christmas, when you started school. They were all returned or simply ignored. Michael took one of the letters and recognized his old address written on the envelope. "Doctor, about the legal matter. A cousin of my grandmother showed up today saying she's going to contest my right to the property." "Ah, Victoria," the lawyer smiled. Elizabeth was expecting this. She left everything very well documented precisely to avoid problems. He opened a drawer and took out an even thicker folder. This folder contains all the documentation that proves Elizabeth acquired the property with her own funds, from the sale of the inheritance left by her father. Victoria has no right to the assets whatsoever, as she was not a direct heir and never contributed financially to anything. And if she hires a lawyer and takes it to court, she can hire whoever she wants. The will has been registered with the court for 5 years, and there are no irregularities. Furthermore, I have several witnesses who can confirm Elizabeth's mental sanity until the end of her life. Michael felt much more at ease. Dr. Parker also showed other interesting documents. Your grandmother also left a small savings account in your name. It's not a lot of money, about $8,000, but it can help with the initial repairs on the house. $8,000 represented a fortune for Michael at that moment. It would be enough to buy construction materials and maybe hire help for the most urgent repairs. "Doctor, can I ask a personal question? Why did my grandmother never try to find me directly?" "She tried several times, Michael. But Patricia had moved without leaving a forwarding address. Elizabeth even hired a private detective to try and locate you, but you seem to have disappeared on purpose. My mother moved cities 3 times in the first few years after my father left." "Exactly. And when you became an adult and got married, Elizabeth finally got your address. But then another problem came up." "What?" "She found out you had lost your wife and were going through financial difficulties. Elizabeth was afraid you would think she was trying to take advantage of a difficult time to get close. She thought you might reject the grandmother who had abandoned the family." Michael felt a tightening in his heart. How many opportunities to meet that special woman had been lost because of misunderstandings and hurt pride? "So she decided to wait for you to reach out to her naturally. That's why she bought that property, hoping that one day you would discover your family roots. And left the clues in the buried box." Elizabeth believed a lot in fate, Michael. She said that when the right time came, you would find your way to her. On the way back home, Ethan slept on his father's lap inside the bus. Michael looked out the window, thinking about all the day's revelations. His life had completely changed in less than 48 hours. When they arrived at the cabin, it was already getting dark. Michael lit the candles and prepared a simple dinner with the groceries he had bought downtown. Ethan woke up excited and wanted to explore the property more, even in the dark. "Dad, can I play in the shed out back?" "You can, but be careful not to get hurt." 15 minutes later, Ethan came running back, shouting with excitement. "Dad! Dad! There's a bunch of cool stuff in the shed." Michael grabbed a flashlight and followed his son to the back of the property. The shed was locked, but the key was hanging on a nail next to the door. Inside there were tools, old sewing machines, fabrics organized on shelves, and many embroidery works carefully packaged. At the back of the shed, there were also some furniture covered with sheets. "Dad, look at this beautiful table." Ethan had discovered a solid wood table and chair set in perfect condition. There was also a bookshelf, a sideboard, and a dresser that looked like they were made by a specialized carpenter. Michael realized that that furniture was probably worth more than everything he owned. His grandmother had kept real treasures in that shed. Among the fabrics, he also found a photo album. There were hundreds of photos showing Elizabeth's life over the decades. Some were from when she was young and married. Others showed the evolution of the cabin since it was built. There were photos of her working in the garden, sewing at the machine, having neighbors over for afternoon coffee. In all the pictures, she seemed like a happy and fulfilled person, but Michael noticed a subtle melancholy in her eyes. "Dad, who is this lady in all the photos?" "That's your great-grandmother Elizabeth, son, the owner of this house." "She was pretty." "Yes, she was. And from what I'm finding out, she was a very special person too." They spent another hour exploring the shed. Michael also found a small workshop with basic carpentry and woodworking tools. There were hand-drawn plans showing improvements Elizabeth wanted to make to the house. One of the plans showed the porch enlarged, with a hanging garden and a covered area for outdoor meals. Another drawing showed the interior of the house with an extra partition, creating a third small bedroom. "Dad, can we do these things that great-grandma drew?" Michael smiled at his son. The idea excited him too. "Of course we can, Ethan. It will be a lot of work, but we have time." They went back inside the house, carrying the photo album and some fabrics that could be useful as curtains. Michael made an improvised bed for Ethan in the smaller room and settled in the living room. Before going to sleep, he leafed through the album one more time. On the last page was a recent photo of Elizabeth sitting on the porch, looking at the road. On the back was written, "For my dear grandson Michael, even if we never meet in this life, know that my love for you will cross any distance or time. This house is my way of hugging you forever. With all the love from the grandma who never stopped waiting for you." Michael cried silently until he fell asleep, holding the photograph against his chest. On the morning of the third day, he woke up to the sound of approaching machinery. Through the window, he saw a construction materials delivery truck stopped in front of the house. "Must be a mistake," he murmured, putting on a t-shirt and going out to check. The driver was consulting a delivery note. "Michael Johnson, 157 Cherry Blossom Street. That's me, but I didn't order anything. I have a prepaid delivery here. Cement, bricks, roof tiles, lumber, paint. Everything's already paid for." Michael was confused. Who could have ordered construction materials in his name? Does it have the name of who paid? It says here, Elizabeth Johnson, scheduled delivery. Michael felt a shiver. His grandmother had scheduled that delivery before passing away, as if she knew exactly when he would appear. The company employees unloaded stacks of materials onto the property. There was everything needed to make complete repairs to the cabin's structure. Michael signed the receipt, still incredulous at another surprise prepared by Elizabeth. Mrs. Margaret appeared to see the commotion. "I knew this would happen," she said, smiling. "You knew." "Elizabeth told me she had scheduled the material delivery for 3 months after your first visit to the lawyer. She calculated you would need that time to decide if you were going to stay on the property and start the renovations." Michael shook his head in admiration. His grandmother had thought of everything with impressive precision. "Mrs. Margaret, can I ask a question? Did Victoria really show up here sometimes?" The neighbor made a displeased expression. "Unfortunately, yes. She first appeared about 10 years ago, when she found out Elizabeth had inherited a good amount of money from the family. She came with sweet talk saying she wanted to reconnect family ties, and my grandmother believed her. Elizabeth was a wise woman, my boy. She received Victoria politely, but she could tell she was only interested in the money. She offered to help Victoria start a small business, but she wanted much larger sums. Did Victoria ever make threats? Not directly, but she said several times that when Elizabeth passed, she would fight for the Johnson family's rights. Your grandmother always replied that she had already left everything organized for the legitimate heir. Michael felt more confident knowing his grandmother had already anticipated that situation. Ethan appeared for breakfast and got excited about the mountain of construction material. "Dad, are we really going to fix up the house now?" "Yes, we are, son. How about we start with the roof?" Michael had worked in construction for years before opening his small contracting business. He knew how to do practically all the necessary repairs on the cabin. The problem was that working alone, it would take him months to finish everything, but he was willing to dedicate the necessary time. For the first time in years, he felt he had a clear purpose and a place where he truly belonged. Around 10 in the morning, a car stopped in front of the house. Michael recognized Victoria, but this time she was accompanied by a man in a suit. "Mr. Michael Johnson?" asked the man approaching the fence. "That's me. My name is Dr. Arthur Williams, attorney for Mrs. Victoria Johnson. I am here to notify you of a will contestation lawsuit that will be filed later today." Michael took a deep breath and tried to remain calm. "Doctor, all my documents are in order and were reviewed by Dr. William Parker Hamilton, the attorney responsible for my grandmother's estate." "That doesn't matter," interrupted Victoria. "Elizabeth was senile when she made that will. Anyone in the family can contest it. Ma'am, I suggest the contestation be made through the proper legal channels. I will not discuss legal matters in a backyard conversation." Dr. Arthur handed a formal notification to Michael. "You have 30 days to present a defense. I recommend you hire a good lawyer." After they walked away, Michael called Dr. Parker and told him about the visit. "Michael, don't worry. This was exactly what we expected. I will prepare the defense and I'm sure the lawsuit will be dismissed." "Doctor, should I continue the work on the house in the meantime?" "You can continue as normal. Possession of the property remains yours until there is a final court decision, which is not going to happen." Excited by the lawyer's words, Michael decided to start the repairs that very day. Ethan would be his assistant and helper in everything possible for an 8-year-old child. They began by organizing the tools they had found in the shed and sorting the materials by type of use. Michael made a detailed list of everything that needed to be fixed. 1. Replace broken roof tiles. 2. Reinforce the wooden structure. 3. Replace rotten floorboards. 4. Remodel the bathroom. 5. Exterior and interior painting. 6. New electrical installation. 7. Kitchen remodel. 8. Construction of the expanded porch. It was a lot of work for one person, but Michael felt a renewed energy. Every hammer blow, every replaced board, was a way to honor Elizabeth's memory and build a better future for Ethan. Dear listener, if you are enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out, now continuing. By the end of the first week of work, Michael had already managed to fix the most urgent roof problems and replace the most deteriorated floorboards. Ethan helped him by holding tools, sorting nails and painting the wood that would be used. "Dad, the house is already looking nicer," the boy said, observing the progress. "Yes, it is, son. Your great-grandmother would be proud to see how her house is being taken care of." During that week, Michael had also gotten a job as a construction worker at a building site in downtown Pineville. He worked part-time from 7 in the morning until noon and dedicated his afternoons to renovating the cabin. The money from the job, combined with Elizabeth's savings, allowed him to buy the materials that weren't included in the scheduled delivery. Michael had calculated that in 3 months he could get the house into excellent condition. Mrs. Margaret appeared every day to check on the progress of the work and always brought something tasty for Michael and Ethan to eat. "My boy, you work just like your grandmother," she would say. Elizabeth was like that too. She wouldn't stop until she finished what she started. "Mrs. Margaret, can I ask you something about my grandmother? How did she get the money to buy this property and still leave some savings?" The neighbor smiled nostalgically. "Elizabeth was a very smart woman, Michael. When her husband passed, she inherited the family's textile factory, but instead of trying to run the business, She sold everything for a very good price. And she invested the money. Part of it she invested in savings certificates, and another part she used to buy this property, which at the time was very cheap because it was a remote rural area. Elizabeth always said that real estate was the best investment there was. Did she do sewing work to survive? She sewed because she enjoyed it, not out of necessity. Elizabeth made custom wedding dresses for the wealthiest families in the region. She charged very well for her work and had a guaranteed clientele. Michael was increasingly impressed by his grandmother's wisdom. She had built an independent and prosperous life at a time when few women managed to do so. "Mrs. Margaret, did my grandmother ever talk about my mother in her later years?" The neighbor's expression grew more serious. "She did, yes." Elizabeth never held a grudge against Patricia, but she suffered a lot from not being able to know you. She said she understood your mother's fears, but that they could have talked and resolved their differences. Fears? Patricia was afraid of losing her husband and son to her mother-in-law. Elizabeth was a cultured, successful woman, and that intimidated your mother, who felt inferior. Michael had never considered that perspective. His mother had always spoken of Elizabeth as a bad person, but perhaps she was just afraid of being compared and judged. Your grandmother tried several times to send messages through mutual acquaintances, offering peace, but Patricia never accepted the dialogue. That night, Michael decided it was time to confront his mother about the whole situation. It had been over a year since he had spoken to Patricia, since an argument about some borrowed money she hadn't paid back. He dialed the number saved in his cell phone's contacts. "Hello? Mom? It's me? Michael?" There was an awkward silence on the other end of the line. "Michael? Wow, what a surprise. I thought you were never going to speak to me again." "Mom, I need to talk to you about something very serious. Did something happen? Is Ethan okay?" "Ethan is great. Mom, I found out that my paternal grandmother was alive until 3 years ago." The silence that followed was even longer. "Michael, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about Mrs. Elizabeth, Mom. You told me she had abandoned the family when I was little. It was a lie." "Michael, you don't understand how things were." "I do understand, Mom. You prevented me from knowing my grandmother and lied about her my entire life." Michael heard his mother sigh heavily on the other end of the line. "Son, that woman wanted to control everything. She thought I wasn't good enough for your father." "That's not true, Mom. I talked to people who knew her. Elizabeth was never prejudiced against you." "You don't know how she treated me, Michael. Always with that air of superiority, as if I were a servant in her house." Michael realized his mother still carried old resentments and couldn't see the situation objectively. "Mom, even if there were problems between you, I had the right to know my grandmother. She left me a house and an inheritance that could have changed our lives a long time ago." "A house? What house?" Michael told her about discovering the cabin and everything he had found. Patricia was visibly disturbed by the information. "Michael, are you sure those papers are real? It could be a scheme by someone trying to take advantage of you." "Mom, I've already spoken with her lawyer. Everything has been documented at the county clerk's office for years. Elizabeth really left me a considerable inheritance." "Considerable how?" Michael realized his mother was more interested in the financial aspect of the inheritance than the emotional side of the discovery. "Enough for Ethan and me to have a decent life." "Michael, your son is my grandson too. I think I should have some rights to this inheritance." The coldness of that statement shocked Michael. "Mom, are you serious? After hiding my grandmother's existence from me for decades, now you want a part of the inheritance she left? Son, don't be ungrateful. I raised you alone after your father left. I deserve some recognition for that." Michael felt a mixture of anger and sadness. Her mother showed no remorse for the lie, only interest in the money. "Mom, I'm ending our conversation here. If you want to see where we're living now, you'll be welcome. But I won't discuss financial matters with someone who has lied to me my whole life." "Michael, don't hang up. We can talk better." He hung up the phone and stood silently on the cabin's porch. Ethan was asleep, and the night was quiet with only the sound of crickets in the yard. Michael felt disappointed, but not surprised by his mother's reaction. Throughout his life, he had noticed that Patricia always prioritized material matters above family relationships. The next day, he woke up determined to focus only on the positive things in his new life. He had his own house, an honest job, a wonderful son, and had discovered he had a grandmother who loved him. During breakfast, Ethan asked a question that caught him off guard. "Dad, why were you sad after talking to Grandma yesterday?" Michael hadn't realized his son had overheard the phone conversation. "Son, sometimes adults get sad when they discover that people they love have done things that weren't right. Did Grandma Patricia do something wrong?" Michael thought about how to answer. He didn't want Ethan to grow up angry at his maternal grandmother, but he also couldn't lie like his mother had. "She hid from me that I had a great-grandmother who loved me. That meant I never got to know a very special person in our family. But now we live in great-grandma's house, right? So it all worked out." Ethan's innocence always managed to put things in perspective. Really, in the end, he had found his way to Elizabeth, even if indirectly. "That's true, son. Sometimes the bad things that happen end up leading to good things." That morning, Michael started working on the bathroom renovation. It was one of the most complex projects, as it involved plumbing and tiling. He had decided to do everything himself to save money. While breaking the old tiles, he found a surprise behind the toilet. There was a small hole in the wall where Elizabeth had hidden another envelope. This one was addressed to Michael, open only if there are problems with the family. Michael carefully opened it and found a 3-page letter explaining in detail all the conflicts Elizabeth had had with Patricia over the years. The letter revealed information Michael had never imagined. Patricia had borrowed money from Elizabeth several times in the early years of her marriage and had never paid it back. When Elizabeth stopped lending, Patricia became furious and began spreading lies about her mother-in-law to her husband and the neighbors. "My dear grandson, I'm not writing these things out of spite, but so that you understand that I always tried to keep the peace in the family. Your mother has many qualities, but she always had difficulty dealing with people she perceived as financially superior. I hope you can forgive her mistakes and build a healthy relationship, but I also hope you know the truth." The letter went on to explain that Elizabeth had offered to help Michael financially during several difficult phases of his life, but Patricia always intercepted the attempts to contact him. "When you married Jennifer, I tried to send a gift through a mutual acquaintance. Patricia sent the gift back and had them say the family didn't need charity. When Ethan was born, I tried to send little clothes and toys. I received the same treatment." Michael felt a growing anger. Elizabeth had tried to help him during the worst moments of his life, and he had never known about it. The letter further revealed that Elizabeth had followed Michael's life from a distance through mutual acquaintances. She knew about the financial difficulties after Jennifer's departure, about the loss of the construction business, and about the move to the boarding house. "That's why I scheduled the building materials to be delivered as soon as you settled into the cabin. I knew you wouldn't have money for renovations, and I wanted to help in a way that your mother couldn't prevent." Michael put the letter away with the other important documents. He decided he wouldn't confront his mother with that information, but at least now he understood the family situation completely. During lunch, Mrs. Margaret showed up with some news. "Michael, I heard that Victoria is spreading rumors around town about you." "What kind of rumors?" "She's saying that you're a con artist who pretended to be related to Elizabeth to steal the inheritance. She's also going around saying that the cabin is going to be demolished because it was illegally occupied." Michael sighed. That situation was becoming more complicated than he had imagined. "Mrs. Margaret, could this cause trouble for me at work or for Ethan's school?" "It certainly could, my dear. Pineville is a small town, and rumors spread quickly. But don't worry, me and others who knew Elizabeth are spreading the truth as well." "What truth?" "That you really are Elizabeth's grandson, that you have all your documents in order, and that you are renovating the house with great care and dedication. People who pass by here on the street can see the quality of your work." Michael felt grateful for the neighbor's loyalty, but he knew he needed to resolve that legal situation as soon as possible. In the afternoon, he called Dr. Parker to check on the progress of the defense. "Michael, I received a copy today of the petition that Victoria filed. It's a very weak case, based only on unfounded allegations. She didn't present any proof of Elizabeth's mental incapacity, nor any documents proving inheritance rights. Doctor, how long could it take to get a decision? In cases like this, it usually doesn't take more than 3 months. The judge will review all the documentation and hear the witnesses. I'm sure the case will be dismissed. And in the meantime, can I continue living in the house? You can continue as normal. Possession isn't questioned until there's a judicial decision. Michael felt more at ease and decided to speed up the renovations so the house would be completely ready when the legal situation was resolved. Over the next 2 weeks, he worked intensely on the renovation. He managed to finish the bathroom, replace all the electrical wiring, and start painting the exterior of the house. Ethan helped with everything he could and was visibly happier and healthier living in the fresh country air. The boy had gained a few pounds. His skin was tanned from the sun and he played outdoors all day. "Dad, this is so much better than the small apartment we lived in before," he said one afternoon while playing with a toy car in the dirt. "It really is much better, son. Here you have space to play and we have our own house." Michael had enrolled Ethan in a nearby rural school where the classes were small and the teaching was more personalized. The boy was adapting well and had already made a few little friends. One afternoon, while Michael was painting the exterior wall of the house, he saw an unfamiliar car approaching. It was an expensive vehicle with Chicago license plates. 2 elegantly dressed women got out of the car. Michael recognized one of them as Victoria, the other was a stranger. "Mr. Michael?" asked the unknown woman. "That's me. My name is Ms. Catherine Miller. I'm a journalist from Channel America. I'm doing a story about family inheritance disputes, and I would like to interview you." Michael immediately became suspicious. It was strange for a journalist from a major network to come to a small town to talk about a case that hadn't even been decided yet. "Doctor, who brought you here?" "I received information that there's an interesting dispute involving this property. Could you tell me your version of the facts?" Michael looked at Victoria, who was smiling maliciously. "Doctor, I have no interest in giving an interview about a matter that is under court seal. But Mr. Johnson, it would be an opportunity to clarify the facts for the public. The facts will be clarified in court, which is the proper place for that." Michael went into the house and closed the door. Through the window, he saw the 2 women talking for a few minutes before leaving. He immediately called Dr. Parker. "Doctor, a journalist showed up here wanting to do a story about the case. Is that normal?" "Michael, that's an old tactic. Victoria is trying to pressure you through the media, hoping you'll accept a financial settlement to avoid public exposure. And what do I do if she actually manages to publish some defamatory story? In that case, we file a lawsuit for moral damages against her and against the media outlet. But I don't believe it will come to that." Michael tried not to worry about that situation, but he knew a television story could really damage his reputation in town. The next day, Mrs. Margaret showed up agitated. "Michael, my dear, Victoria is offering money to people to speak badly about you on television." "What do you mean?" "She was at Mrs. Nancy's house yesterday offering $500 for her to give an interview saying you are not related to Elizabeth. And did Mrs. Nancy accept?" "Of course not. She told Victoria to get lost and said if she showed up again she'd call the police." Michael was impressed by Victoria's desperation. She was using increasingly questionable methods to try to harm him. "Mrs. Margaret, did she approach anyone else?" "Yes, she went to old Mr. Anthony's house, the convenience store, and Joe Carter's repair shop. But everyone sent her away. The people in the area knew your grandmother and know you are an honest person." Michael felt grateful for the community's support, but he knew Victoria wouldn't give up easily. That afternoon, he was working on the roof when he saw Ethan running towards the house coming from school. "Dad! Dad! Something bad is happening!" Michael quickly came down the ladder. "What is it, son?" "The boys at school are saying that we're going to be thrown out of the house because we stole it from an old lady." Michael's heart sank. The rumors spread by Victoria were reaching the school children. "Ethan, look at me. You know we didn't steal anything, right? Your great-grandmother left this house to us because she loved me." "I know, Dad." But the boys kept talking and I felt ashamed. Michael crouched down to his son's level and hugged him. "Son, sometimes people tell lies about others because they are angry or jealous. But we know the truth, and that's what matters. Will the boys stop saying these things? Yes, they will stop. Soon everything will be resolved, and everyone will know we have the right to live here. That night, Michael made a decision. He couldn't wait passively for the court's decision while his reputation and his son's were being attacked publicly. The next morning, he went to Ethan's school and asked to speak to the principal. "Principal Mary, I'm Michael Johnson, Ethan's father." "Ah, yes, Ethan is a wonderful boy, Mr. Johnson. Very smart and polite." "Principal, I came here because I heard there are comments circulating about my family at the school." The principal became serious. "Mr. Johnson, we have indeed received some comments from parents questioning your situation, but I want to make it clear that this does not affect how we treat Ethan in any way. Principal, may I explain the real situation?" Michael Johnson told the whole story of discovering the inheritance and showed the documents that proved his rights. The principal was moved by the account. "Mr. Johnson, what a beautiful story. Could you tell it at the next parent-teacher meeting? I think it would be a good way to clear up the misunderstandings." "Yes, I can, Principal. I have nothing to hide." The parent-teacher meeting was scheduled for the following week. Michael prepared carefully, organizing all the documents and photos that supported his version of the events. On the day of the meeting, he arrived feeling a little nervous but determined to clarify the situation. There were about 20 parents in the room, some of whom looked at him with curiosity when he entered. Principal Mary introduced Michael and explained that he would like to clear up some misunderstandings about his family. Michael began by talking about the difficult life he had led with Ethan, about finding the cabin's advertisement, and about the box buried in the backyard. He showed photos of Elizabeth, the letter she had left, and the legal documents. "I understand it might seem strange for someone to inherit a property without knowing about it, but sometimes families have complicated histories. The important thing is that now my son has a stable home, and I can provide a decent life for him." One of the mothers present raised her hand. "Mr. Johnson, is it true that a relative of the deceased is contesting the inheritance?" "Yes, it's true, but my lawyer has assured me that I have all the rights to the property. The contest is just an attempt by some people to take advantage of the situation." A father asked, "What about the TV news story that was going to run about the case?" "There won't be any news story because there is no crime or irregularity to report. It was just an attempt at psychological pressure." At the end of the meeting, several parents approached Michael to congratulate him and apologize for the inappropriate comments that had been circulating. "Mr. Johnson, we admire your courage for coming here to clear everything up," said one of the mothers. "We realize you are an honest and hard-working person." Michael left the school feeling much better. He had managed to clear up the misunderstandings and regain the respect of the school community. When he got home, he found Ethan playing in the backyard with 2 little friends from school. "Dad, the boys came over to play at our house." Michael smiled. It was a sign that the situation was returning to normal. "That's great, son. Do you guys want a snack?" He made sandwiches and juice for the children and felt happy seeing Ethan integrated with his classmates. Since they had moved to the cabin, the boy had become more sociable and confident. That weekend, Michael decided to take a break from the renovations and take Ethan to get to know the area better. They went to downtown Pineville and visited the farmers market, where they bought fruits and vegetables from local producers. "Dad, everyone knows you here," Ethan observed. It was true. Michael had become known in town as Grandma Elizabeth's grandson, and people greeted him warmly in the streets. They had lunch at a simple diner and then went to the city park, where Ethan played on the equipment while Michael chatted with other parents. "Your grandmother was a very respected person here," said an elderly gentleman. "She made the clothes for my daughter's wedding. Impeccable work." "Did you know her personally?" "Of course." Elizabeth attended the main church every Sunday, always very elegant and polite. She talked a lot about the grandson who lived far away. Michael felt emotional every time someone shared memories of Elizabeth. It was as if he was getting to know his grandmother through these people's stories. The following Sunday, he decided to visit the church that Elizabeth had attended. It was a simple Catholic church in the center of town, with colonial architecture and colorful stained glass windows. The priest, a middle-aged man named Father Joseph, recognized Michael as soon as he saw him. "You must be Michael, Grandma Elizabeth's grandson." "How did you know?" "Elizabeth talked about you so much that I feel like I've known you for years. She always said you would show up one day and that when it happened, I should help you with whatever you needed." Father Joseph told him that Elizabeth was one of the parish's most active volunteers. She organized charity bazaars, helped families in need, and sang in the church choir. "Your grandmother left a sum of money for the church with one specific condition. She said that when her grandson appeared, that money should be used to help him if he was going through hard times." Michael was surprised once again by Elizabeth's foresight. "Father, I'm not having any difficulties right now. Perhaps this money could be used to help other families in the community." Elizabeth also said that if you didn't need the help, you should decide how the money would be used. It's a considerable amount, about $5,000. Michael thought for a moment. He had an idea for how to use that money in a way that would honor his grandmother's memory. "Father Joseph, how about we use this money to create a social project in the community? Something related to education or job training?" The priest was excited by the idea. "Michael, we have a space here at the church that could be used for craft workshops and vocational courses. Elizabeth always wanted to do something like this, but she never had the time to organize it. Then let's do it in her honor." They agreed to meet the following week to plan the social project. Michael felt he was finding a perfect way to honor Elizabeth's memory while also contributing to the community that had welcomed him. During the week, he continued working on the house renovations. He had already finished the interior and was focusing on building the expanded porch that Elizabeth had drawn in the plans. The new porch would have a wide roof, protection from rain and wind, and enough space for outdoor meals. Michael was strictly following the drawings left by his grandmother. One afternoon, while assembling the wooden frame of the porch, he saw Dr. Parker arriving by car. "Michael, I have great news." The lawyer got out of the car smiling and carrying a folder of documents. "Doctor, what happened?" The judge reviewed all the case documentation and ruled against the lawsuit filed by Victoria. The decision came out today. Michael felt a wave of relief wash over his entire body. "Does that mean the matter is closed?" "Completely closed. Victoria can still try to appeal, but she has no grounds for it. The property is definitely yours." Michael hugged the lawyer, emotional. "Dr. Parker, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done." "No need to thank me, Michael. It was a pleasure defending the rights that Elizabeth wanted to secure for you." Dr. Parker explained that the court's decision had been clear and forceful. The judge considered that Victoria had not presented any valid evidence to contest the will, and that Michael possessed all the necessary documentation to prove his inheritance rights. The judge also ordered Victoria to pay the court costs and attorney fees. She'll think twice before trying anything like that again. That night, Michael celebrated with Ethan by making a homemade pizza in the brick oven they had built in the backyard. "Dad, can we stay in the house forever now?" "Forever, son. This is our home, and no one can take it away from us." Ethan danced with joy around the backyard, carrying his slice of pizza. Michael looked around the property that was now officially his. The cabin was completely transformed. The walls had been painted white with light blue details, the roof was new, the expanded porch was almost ready, and the garden was starting to take shape. It was exactly how Elizabeth had dreamed it would be. The following weekend, Michael organized a small housewarming party for the renovated home. He invited Mrs. Margaret, Father Joseph, Principal Mary, some neighbors, and the parents of Ethan's little friends. Mrs. Margaret brought a chocolate cake, Father Joseph brought sodas, and each family contributed some food. It was a simple party, but full of warmth and joy. "Michael, your grandmother would be so proud to see how you've transformed this place," said Mrs. Margaret, looking around the property. The house was truly unrecognizable. The expanded porch had become Michael and Ethan's favorite spot for meals. The garden had been replanted with flowers and a small vegetable patch. The shed in the back had been turned into an organized workshop. During the party, Father Joseph announced the community project they had planned. "Everyone, Michael had a wonderful idea. We're going to use a donation that Mrs. Elizabeth left for the church to create vocational training workshops for the community." People were excited about the proposal. Several mothers offered to help as volunteers, and some fathers suggested types of courses that would be useful in the area. We can have workshops for sewing, woodworking, cooking, crafts, and even basic computer skills, explained Michael. The important thing is to give people in the community opportunities to learn new skills. At the end of the party, when everyone had left, Michael and Ethan sat on the new porch watching the sunset. "Dad, do you think Great-Grandma can see us here?" Michael smiled and hugged his son. "I'm sure she can, Ethan, and I'm sure she's very happy seeing how we're taking care of her house with love. Dad, can I ask you something?" "Of course, son." "Are you still sad that you never got to meet Great-Grandma?" Michael thought about the question. In recent months, his perspective on that issue had changed a lot. "You know, Ethan, I've learned that sometimes we don't need to know someone personally to feel their love. Everything Great-Grandma left for us was a way for her to show love." "How so?" "She left this house for us to live in. She left money for us to take care of ourselves. She left the plans for us to renovate. She even left the building materials. All of that was love." Ethan was thoughtful for a few minutes. "So even without knowing her, we were already loved by her." "Exactly, son. And now we can return that love by taking good care of everything she left us." That night, Michael slept peacefully for the first time in years. He finally felt secure, fulfilled, and with a purpose in life. The next morning, he woke up to the sound of birds singing in the garden. Ethan was already awake, playing with his toy cars on the porch. "Dad, did you see the new flowers in the garden?" Michael went out to look. Indeed, some rose bushes that had seemed dry had sprouted red flowers overnight. He remembered the passage from Elizabeth's diary that he had read months ago. "Today I planted the rose seedlings I bought at the market. Michael loved the red roses when he came to visit me." It was impossible that he had visited Elizabeth as a child, but somehow the red roses really did awaken a familiar and comforting feeling in his heart. "They're beautiful, aren't they, Dad?" "Yes, son. They were your great-grandmother's favorite flowers." Michael decided it was a good time to show Ethan all the photo albums he had found. They sat on the porch and leafed together through the hundreds of photographs documenting Elizabeth's life. "Look, Dad, here she is planting the roses, and here she is sewing in the shed. Wow, she made such beautiful dresses." Michael took the opportunity to tell stories about Elizabeth based on everything he had discovered over the last few months. Ethan listened, fascinated, asking questions, and creating a mental image of the great-grandmother he had never met. "Dad, do you think if she had known us, she would have liked me?" "Ethan, she would have loved you more than anything in the world. I am absolutely sure of that." That week, Michael started working on the church's social project. They had decided to start with sewing and craft workshops, using the machines Elizabeth had left in the shed. The first course would have 10 students and would be taught by an experienced seamstress from the area. Michael took responsibility for preparing the space in the church and organizing the necessary materials. "Michael, your grandmother would be thrilled to know her sewing machines are going to be used to teach others," said Father Joseph as they organized the room. "Father, I have a feeling all of this was somehow already planned by her. Elizabeth always said God has a plan for every person. Maybe her plan included you carrying on the social work she always wanted to do." The first workshop class was a success. The 10 enrolled women were excited about the quality of the machines and the organization of the course. Michael attended the class and was moved to see how well the project was going. One of the students, Mrs. Mary, had recently lost her job and saw sewing as an opportunity for extra income. "Mr. Johnson, this course came at just the right time in my life. Thank you so much for thinking of us." "Mrs. Mary, it was my grandmother who thought of you. I'm just fulfilling the dream she had." Over the following weeks, the project grew. They added cooking workshops on Saturdays and began planning a basic carpentry course for the men in the community. Michael had found his calling. He continued working as a bricklayer during the mornings, took care of the house renovations in the afternoons, and dedicated his evenings and weekends to the social projects. Ethan was developing very well. His grades at school had improved significantly, and he had become one of the most popular kids in his class. "Mr. Johnson, "Ethan is unrecognizable since you moved to the cabin," said Principal Mary during a parent-teacher conversation. "He is more confident, communicative, and has shown a lot of interest in his studies." Michael felt he had made the right decision by accepting this new life in the countryside. The big city had become a place of difficulties and sadness, while Pineville represented a fresh start and opportunities. 3 months after the court decision, Michael received an unexpected visitor. It was a Sunday morning, and he was watering the plants in the garden when he saw a woman approaching the fence. It was his mother, Patricia. "Michael, it's me, son." He was surprised, but not unpleasantly so. Patricia looked thinner and had a more humble expression than he remembered. "Mom, come in, come in." "Wow, Michael, what a transformation. This house is beautiful." Patricia looked around the property with genuine admiration. The cabin was truly unrecognizable, looking like it belonged in a home decor magazine. "Mom, how did you get the address?" I asked in town. Everyone knows the story of Mrs. Elizabeth's grandson. Ethan came running from the back of the yard and was a little shy when he saw the grandmother he hadn't seen in over a year. "Hi, Grandma." "Ethan, you've gotten so big and handsome." Patricia hugged her grandson emotionally. Michael realized she had genuinely missed the boy. They sat on the porch to talk. Patricia praised the renovations and wanted to know all the details about the discovery of the inheritance and the legal problems they had faced. "Michael, I need to apologize to you." "Apologize for what, Mom?" "For hiding the existence of your grandmother all these years. I was wrong." Michael was surprised by his mother's sincerity. "Mom, what made you change your mind?" "Son, when you told me about the inheritance, I got angry and jealous. I thought Elizabeth was trying to humiliate our family even after she was gone. But after the initial anger passed, I started to reflect on everything." Patricia explained that she had sought out some people who knew Elizabeth to try and understand the situation better. "I found out that your grandmother really tried to keep in touch with us several times over the years, and I also discovered that I misinterpreted many situations in the past." "How so?" "Michael, I had a huge inferiority complex back then. Elizabeth came from a family with money, and I always felt inferior to her. Any gesture she made I interpreted as an attempt to humiliate me." Michael listened patiently as his mother talked about the mistakes of the past. "Elizabeth offered help several times, and I always rejected it with wounded pride. When you married Jennifer, she wanted to give you gifts, and I forbade it. When Ethan was born, she wanted to meet her great-grandson, and I didn't allow it." "Mom, why are you telling me this now?" "Because I want to ask for forgiveness, Michael, and because I want you to know that your grandmother was a good person who was treated unfairly by me." Michael was moved, seeing the sincerity in his mother's remorse. "Mom, I forgive you. And I'm sure that if Elizabeth were here, she would forgive you too." Patricia stayed at the cabin for a few days, getting to know the place better and helping Michael with some details of the renovations. She was a skilled craftswoman and suggested some improvements to the decor. "Son, can I make a suggestion?" "Of course, Mom." "How about creating a small memorial for Elizabeth here in the house, some special place where you can honor her memory?" Michael really liked the idea. They decided to turn a corner of the porch into a small altar with pictures of Elizabeth, some of her sewing, and the most significant personal items she had left behind. "Dad, can we put the red flowers she liked here nearby?" suggested Ethan. "Great idea, son." The memorial turned out very beautiful and welcoming. It was a space where they could sit to remember Elizabeth and be thankful for everything she had provided for them. On the last day of the visit, Patricia made an unexpected proposal. "Michael, how about I move to Pineville to be close to you?" "Mom, are you sure?" "Yes, I am, son. In Chicago, I have nothing left holding me there. My friends are gone. The neighborhood has changed a lot, and I feel lonely. Here I could help take care of Ethan and participate in the social projects you are developing." Michael talked with Ethan about the possibility of his grandmother moving near them. The boy was excited about the idea. "Dad, can Grandma live here with us?" "The house isn't big enough for 3 people, son, but she can rent a little house here in the area and be very close to us." Michael helped his mother look for a house to rent in the area. They found a small residence just 3 blocks from the cabin on a quiet street with a welcoming neighborhood. Patricia moved a month later, bringing her few belongings and a lot of willingness to start life over. Michael, thank you for giving me this second chance to be a better mother and a present grandmother. Mum, that's what family is all about. We make mistakes, we learn, and we try again. Patricia's presence brought a new dynamic to the lives of Michael and Ethan. She cooked very well, helped Ethan with his school homework, and quickly integrated into the church's social projects. Michael, your mother has an incredible talent for crafts, said Father Joseph. She's teaching the women in the workshop techniques I had never seen before. Patricia had found her place in the community and felt useful and valued for the first time in many years. 1 year after moving to the cabin, Michael looked around the property and could hardly believe the transformation that had happened in their lives. The house was completely renovated and tastefully decorated. The garden was flowering and well kept. The workshop in the back was always in use for the social projects, and most importantly, they had become a close-knit and happy family. Dad, do you think our life would be different if we had never found the cabin? Asked Ethan on a Sunday afternoon. Michael reflected on the question. It was hard to imagine what life would be like if he had never seen that ad in the newspaper. I think it would be very different, son. We'd probably still be living in that small apartment with financial struggles and no prospects for improvement. And do you think it was luck or destiny? It was a deep question for a 9-year-old boy, but Ethan had always been a thoughtful child. You know, Ethan, I think it was a bit of both. We were lucky that I saw that ad in the newspaper, but maybe it was also destiny, like Great-Grandma used to say. How so? Great-Grandma believed that the right people meet at the right time. Maybe she was right, and we were destined to find this house exactly when we needed it most. Ethan was satisfied with the answer and went back to playing in the garden. Michael remained seated on the porch, watching the quiet movement on the street. Children passed by on their way to school, neighbors chatted on the sidewalk, dogs played in the yards. It was a simple life, but full of meaning and purpose. He had a job he liked, his own house, a healthy and happy son, a mother who had become a companion and ally, and a social project that was helping many people in the community. Elizabeth had managed to provide all this for him through her love and dedication, even though they had never met in person. Thank you, Grandma, Michael said softly, looking at the memorial on the porch. Thank you for never giving up on me and for preparing everything with so much care. A colorful butterfly landed on the red roses, stayed there for a few seconds, and then flew toward the blue sky. Michael smiled, interpreting it as a sign that Elizabeth had heard his words of gratitude. 2 years later, the church's social project had expanded and become a reference in the region. They offered professional training courses for more than 50 people per semester and had a waiting list of interested individuals. Michael had been elected general coordinator of the project and dedicated more and more time to volunteer work. He had discovered that his true calling wasn't just construction, but rather helping other people build a better life. Dad, are you happy? Asked Ethan one night, while they did homework together at the porch table. Very happy, son. Happier than I ever imagined I could be, even without having met Great-Grandma. Ethan, I think I did get to know Great-Grandma. How? Through everything she left for us, every detail of this house, every object she saved, every project she did, all of it shows me what she was like. Michael flipped through the photo album that always stayed on the porch table. Looking at these pictures, I see that she was a generous, hard-working, caring person who loved family above all else. I know Great-Grandma through the love she showed us. And does she know us too? I'm sure she can, son. Wherever she is, she can see how well we're taking care of everything she left us. Ethan smiled and went back to doing his homework. Michael continued flipping through the photos, stopping at one that showed Elizabeth sitting exactly where he was at that moment, on the cabin's porch. In the photo, she was holding a coffee cup and looking at the garden with an expression of contentment. Michael could feel the peace and serenity she must have been feeling at that moment. He made some coffee and sat down in the exact same spot where Elizabeth was in the photo. The feeling of connection with her was almost palpable. Grandma, I promise I will always take care of this house and this family with the same love you showed us, he said in his thoughts. The wind gently rustled the leaves of the blackberry tree where they had found the first buried box. Michael interpreted this as a loving response from Elizabeth. That night he wrote a letter to his grandmother, knowing she could never read it, but feeling the need to put his feelings on paper. Dear Grandma Elizabeth, today marks exactly 2 years since I found the box buried under the blackberry tree and discovered I had a grandmother who loved me. I want you to know that not a day goes by that I don't think of you and thank you for everything you did for me and for Ethan. You transformed our lives in a way I can't even explain. The cabin you bought with so much care has become a home full of love and joy. Ethan is growing up strong and healthy, getting good grades in school and becoming a generous and kind boy. My mother has apologized for the mistakes of the past, and today she is a precious companion in our family. You would be happy to know that she speaks of you with affection and respect. The social projects we created in your honor are helping many families in the community. Your sewing machines are being used to teach other women a trade. The money you left for the church is being invested in education and training. Grandma, I wanted you to know that I love you very much, even though I never got to talk to you. Your love reached me through every gesture of affection I found in this house. I promise I will raise Ethan with the same values I see in the objects and the projects you left behind. I will teach him about family, generosity, honest work, and unconditional love. Thank you for waiting for me for so many years. Thank you for preparing everything so carefully. Thank you for teaching me that love can cross any distance or time. With all the love and gratitude from your grandson, who never stopped being loved, Michael. He put the letter away with Elizabeth's other important documents. It was a way of completing the circle of communication she had started with her own letters. 3 years after discovering the cabin, Michael received an unexpected offer. The mayor of Pineville wanted to hire him to coordinate a municipal job training program based on the success of the church project. Mr. Johnson, your work has become an example for other towns in the region, said the mayor. We want to expand the project and turn it into public policy. It was an incredible professional opportunity, but Michael wanted to be sure he could maintain the values and philosophy that Elizabeth had inspired in the original project. Mr. Mayor, I accept the proposal, but on one condition. What is it? The program must always keep its focus on the most needy people in the community, without political or electoral interests. It must be genuine social work. I agree completely, Mr. Johnson. That is exactly why we want you as the coordinator. Michael accepted the position and began to dedicate himself fully to the social work. It was a significant career change, but he felt he had found his true calling in life. Ethan, now 11 years old, was becoming a responsible and engaged preteen. He volunteered willingly in the social projects and showed interest in continuing the work his father had started. Dad, when I grow up, I want to work helping people too. That's great, son. I think your great-grandmother would be very proud to know you want to follow that path. Dad, do you think if I had met great-grandma, she would have taught me important things? Michael smiled. Ethan always asked deep questions about Elizabeth. Son, I think she's still teaching you today. How? Through the example she left behind. Every time you help someone, every time you are generous, every time you take care of our things with affection, you are learning from great-grandma. Ethan was thoughtful for a few moments. So, great-grandma is kind of like our invisible teacher. That's a beautiful way to think about it, Ethan. She is our life teacher, even if she isn't here physically. In the 4th year after discovering the inheritance, Michael decided to write a book telling the whole family story. He wanted to document Elizabeth's life and the transformation she had brought about, to preserve this memory for future generations. Dad, are you really going to write a book? Yes, I am, Ethan, and you're going to help me, because you are part of this story too. They spent months organizing photos, documents, letters, and testimonies from people who had known Elizabeth. The research work brought them even closer to her memory. Michael discovered fascinating details about his grandmother's life. She had been one of the first women entrepreneurs in the region, a respected community leader, and a person who had helped dozens of families throughout her life. Dad, Great-grandma was almost famous here in town. She was, son. She was a very special person, loved by everyone. The book was launched in a simple ceremony at the public library in Pineville. The whole community attended to hear Michael tell the love story that had transformed their lives. "This isn't just my family's story," Michael said during the launch. "It's the story of how love can cross generations and transform lives, even when we can't be physically present." The book became a local success and inspired other people to value their own family stories and preserve the memory of their ancestors. 5 years after the discovery of the cabin, Michael looked back and could hardly believe the journey he had lived. From a desperate man with no prospects, he had become a respected community leader, a fulfilled father, and a person who had found his purpose in life. The cabin, which he had bought as a last resort, had been transformed into a home full of love, memories, and meaning. Every room told a story, every object held a special memory. The garden, which Elizabeth had planted with such care, was more beautiful than ever. The red rose bushes bloomed every year, the fruit trees bore abundant fruit, and the backyard had become a refuge of peace and tranquility. Ethan was growing up healthy, intelligent, and with solid values. He understood the importance of family history and felt proud of the roots they had discovered. Patricia had become a present and caring grandmother, enjoying the second chance life had given her to be a better person. The social projects continued to grow and positively impact hundreds of families in the region. One Sunday afternoon, as Michael was watering the plants in the garden, Ethan approached him with a question that made him reflect. "Dad, do you think our story will inspire other people?" "I hope so, son. If our story can help someone not give up on their dreams or value family more, it will have been worth it. And do you think our great-grandmother knew all this was going to happen?" Michael stopped watering the plants and looked at Elizabeth's memorial on the porch. "You know, Ethan, I think she had a very strong intuition. Maybe she didn't know exactly how things would unfold, but she was sure that love always finds a way to get where it needs to go. Like how her love reached us? Exactly. Great-grandma's love crossed years of separation, family misunderstandings, and even her own passing. It reached us through this house, through the things she saved, the projects she dreamed of, the money she set aside." Ethan smiled and ran off to play in the backyard. Michael continued watering the plants, thinking about the simple but profound wisdom he had learned from that whole experience. True love knows no limitations of time or space. It can show itself through simple gestures like saving toys for a grandchild you never met, or through grand gestures like buying a house to shelter a family that doesn't even know you exist. Elizabeth had planted seeds of love that kept sprouting and blooming years after she was gone. Every person who benefited from the social projects, every family that found a new opportunity through the vocational courses, every child playing in the backyard of the cabin, all of it was the fruit of the love she had planted. "Thank you, Grandma," Michael said once more, looking up at the sky. "Thank you for teaching me that love is the most valuable inheritance we can leave for the people we love." A butterfly landed on the most beautiful red rose in the garden, stayed there for a few moments, and then flew off toward the infinite, carrying Michael's words of gratitude with it. End of story. So, what did you think of this moving story? Could you feel all the love Elizabeth had for Michael? Let us know in the comments which part moved you the most, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow other amazing stories like this one. Your like and subscription make all the difference.